Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content that I'm making, please click that subscribe button. Also remember to click that bell button and make sure to tick that box to send all notifications so you don't miss out on any videos. With that in mind, let's get on with the video. What's up guys, welcome to Munchkins Gaming, where we take your gaming to the next level. This is Munchkins logging in to bring you another Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia video. And welcome to my video guide on Machina's event, Keeper of Fear in the Chaos difficulty. Now we do have quite a few things to go through, so I suggest let's start this video straight away with the last bosses, weaknesses, resistances, and the elements that it can absorb, and of course its abilities as well. This time around we're going to be fighting the MARILITH Tempest. It doesn't have any weaknesses, doesn't have any resistances, and it also doesn't have anything that it can absorb. As for its abilities, it has Thundaga, which is a Thunder Magic Brave attack, Crossblade, which is a melee HP attack, which also increases its Brave afterwards, Sword Stance, which is a melee Brave attack and will grant itself an attack up buff, Flash of Steel, which is a group range Brave attack, Cutting Reel, which is a melee Brave attack will also grant itself a max Brave up to itself, Cutting Reel Plus, which is a plus version of Cutting Reel, is a melee Brave attack and also increases its Brave and will also grant itself a max Brave up to itself. Next is Ballet Omega, which recovers itself from the break status. It is a melee Brave attack plus HP attack, and this also increases its Brave after the HP attack. Next is Tempest Bolt, which increases its Brave when its Brave is less than its initial Brave, and it will do a Group Thunder Magic Brave attack plus HP attack. Next up, it has Electric Cannon, which is a Thunder Magic Brave attack. This also inflicts a Physical Resist Down debuff and a Thunder Resist Down debuff. Next, a couple of techs that you need to look out for. First is Moving Nimbly, which raises its own attack, defense, speed, initial Brave, and also its max Brave. Midway through the fight, it will also say Moving Even More Nimbly. This just means that it will further raise its stats. And finally, it has Luke's Angry. This further raises its stats even further than Moving Even More Nimbly, but it only activates when one of the bosses dies. And finally, let's take a look at the immunities that the boss has. It actually has quite a few immunities to debuffs, such as Attack Down, Defense Down, Speed Down, Max Brave Down, and also Poison. Okay, so now that we know the weaknesses, resistances, elements that the boss can absorb, as well as its abilities, it's time to take a look at some general tips and guide. And the first one is to save about 80% of your abilities for the last boss. Now you may be wondering why. This is only a two-way fight. However, the bosses actually have a ton of HP, so you want to use a lot of your HP attacks plus on the first wave as much as you can. You can still use some of your abilities, but I do suggest saving about 80% of your abilities for the last boss. Now the next tip I have for you guys is to bring in the boosted characters such as Machina, Rem, and of course Agrius. I didn't include Sid here because I do feel like he is not viable for Chaos just yet. Now other characters that you may want to consider bringing are Ultimisia, Warrior of Light, Squall, Ace, Pooja, Ramza, Garland, Noel, and of course Cloud. Now this is actually the very first time I'm sort of adding Noel in the mix here, because I feel like with his shaving slash, he is quite viable for this fight, and since the boss finally doesn't have anything that can absorb what Noel has, such as his Tempest Strike has both wind and ice element, this is finally the time for Noel to get some shine. Even though he has been with us for a while, and I do believe he is Chaos viable, his EX does actually ignore defense, so it's actually a pretty good EX ability, especially when the boss's stats are so high that you're doing less and less damage. His EX will just ignore the defense and will do a decent amount of damage. Now for the Healers plus Brave Battery options, we do have an option between Charlotta and of course Param. Now, I would add Rem here, but I've already put Rem in the boosted character section, but she is also quite viable in this fight. And as for the summon, you do have an option between Ifrit, Shiva, and Ramu. It just depends which one you prefer. Any one of them is fine, seeing as the boss doesn't have any resistances at all. Okay, so now let's take a look at some general strategies that you may want to implement when you're trying to clear this fight. The first one, let's talk about the friend support. As always, it's between Charlotta and Agrias at this moment in time. Charlotta is more for damage. She is more for HP damage rather than anything else. And Agrias is more for the safety option if you want to silence the boss, as sometimes they will use magic brave attacks. And she can also paralyze if you're lucky enough to get the paralysis. And if the friend support has the C65 ability, you can also 100% paralyze the boss, but if you do this, you won't be getting off a second Hallowed Bolt. You just have to keep that in mind. Now the next tip I have for you guys, or the strategy, is to bring in a gravity based character like Ultimisia. This will help you burn down the boss's high brave. Just like before, there are other options, however I do not know how well they are going to do in this fight, such as Bartz and of course Gilgamesh have these gravity based attacks. Now the other options are obviously Charlotta, as I mentioned before, with her EX, and I'm also adding Noel here as well. Just like I mentioned before, his saving slash is actually a gravity based attack with a brave attack post afterwards. You just have to make sure that you do have his Bloomstone and you have the C70 passive as well in order to be as efficient as you can. Next is basically paralysis and silence are going to be your best friend. Now obviously if the boss is immune to these, it's not going to be your best friend, but seeing as the boss is not immune to paralysis or silence, these are going to be your best friend and they're going to give you extra turns. The silence is not guaranteed. The boss doesn't always use a magic brave attack. So paralysis if you really want to be safe, and silence if you want to take a small risk. Next up is try not to get broken, because they do get a lot of brave from their multiple attacks. So their attacks isn't just a one slash, it's multiple slashes, and it keeps getting higher and higher with their brave, especially when they buff themselves with a max brave up. So do try to limit the amount of times you do get broken, and if you do, make sure you can actually break them back. And finally, of course, you're gonna have to have some good luck, because honestly, I don't know why, but for the most part, a lot of the bosses' attack have missed my characters. I'm not sure whether they actually have a low chance to hit with their abilities, but I notice a lot of my characters have been dodging their attacks, which is quite surprising and really quite baffling to me. So maybe it's good luck, or maybe the bosses just have a low accuracy with their abilities. Okay guys, now that we have the general strategy out of the way, let's take a look at some party compositions and some extra strategy that you may want to implement with these party compositions. The first one is going to be the boosted team, which consists of Machina, Ram, and Agrias with an Agrias support and a Shiva for the summon. Basically, the idea here is again to time your Agrias and your friend Agrias' silence and their paralysis. Now, I would highly recommend your own Agrias doing the paralysis, so you can use Hollow Bolt twice on your friend Agrias. I mean, they can try and paralyze the boss as well, even though it has a low chance of happening. But if you do get that paralysis, I mean, like I said, you gotta have a little bit of luck when it comes to chaos. Machina is going to be your brave shaver. With this, he can shave some of the brave that the boss gets, especially when they attack him with his counter. It's not always there because he's not really a tank, he doesn't have provoke, which is kind of surprising that he has some sort of counter ability, but hey, just take what you can get with Machina and that's it. And again, Ram here is going to be for your turn shenanigans, seeing as she has a rework with this release of Machina's event. She's really viable in this fight, and honestly, my Rem actually had a lot more abilities, and I already ended the fight, and I was quite surprised with this, but at the same time, I'm really relieved that she's actually really viable now for Chaos. Now the next team I have for you guys here is what you guys are seeing right now in this video. It consists of Agrias, Rem, and Ultimisia with an Agrias support and a Shiva for the summon. Basically, the strategy here is the same thing as the party composition 1 that I mentioned earlier. The only change here is Ultimisia using her skill 2 for Brave Shaving later. Try to save her skill 2 as much as you can, because honestly, that's gonna help you Brave Shave the boss later down the track, especially when their stats are so sky high that you're dealing much less damage than usual. Now the third team I have for you guys here consists of Agrias, Cloud, and Ramza with Charlotta support and Shiva for the summon. Now basically this party composition is going to be a safe party composition. Basically double paralysis is available with Agrias and Cloud together. Obviously, if you can paralyze 2 at once with Agrias, just save Cloud's paralysis for later, especially if they're doing an all attack, or even like if someone has a high Brave all of a sudden, just make sure you have that handy for Cloud, and just take a look at the turn count and see how you go. Ramza is here to save some turn counts for you guys, because I do believe we only have like 75 turns in order to meet the turn requirement here, so having Ramza here should save you some of the turn counts is really going to help. And for your friend Charlotta, of course, you can change this to Agrias as well if you want more safe turns. Having 3 of them is really going to be insane, and hopefully you can kill them before you run out of your safety nets. Now the last one I have for you guys here, it consists of, I guess, the meta team, or the team that actually can clear a lot of the chaos, and it consists of Warrior of Light, Ultimisia, and Charlotta with a Charlotta support and Shiva for the summon. Basically, Warrior of Light here is for his shields to avoid getting broken. You can also use his C65 ability to reduce the Brave damage that you are taking. Double Charlotta for massive HP damage, and again Ultimisia for gravity based attacks when bosses have a high Brave. Okay guys, so we're finally at the end of this video, and I'll give you guys my final thoughts on this fight. Well, honestly, this has been one of the most easiest chaos that I've ever fought. It's by no means super easy, because this is chaos. It's still quite difficult. There's still some one-hit mechanics if you're not too careful, but I feel like this is more forgiving, seeing as the boss doesn't have any resistances nor any elements that it can absorb. There are still some characters that you may not want to bring, such as Kryle, because in the first wave the boss are actually absorbing thunder-based attacks. So that's why I actually, on my first blind run, wanted to use Kryle, but found out, because I didn't look, it was a blind run, that Kryle is not viable in the first wave. However, if you can carry her through the first wave, you may be able to use her actually on the boss's wave. In all honesty, because of the freedom that the boss gives us without any resistances or elements it can absorb, there are more viable characters obviously that I probably didn't mention. I didn't mention any of the debuffer characters such as Sarah, and of course Titus, even though Titus is, I do believe, will be quite viable even without his debuffs. It's just that I felt like, you're not using those characters to their full potential, so I would say just avoid using them. But obviously, if you really want to use Titus, you can. He does have 100% splash damage with his EX, so it's really nice. And all I can say is I'm glad that this chaos fight isn't as bad as the tree fight with the Crystal Awakening Batch 5. That one was a nasty chaos fight, and of course Agrias' Lost Chapter as well is quite a nasty chaos fight as well. So overall, I do feel like this fight is more forgiving, and I did quite enjoy a little bit of relaxation, I guess, after the fight, and I'm like, oh man, I don't think this was as hard as the other ones, but at the same time there are still some one-hit mechanics, so you do have to be careful. And I did use 2 boosted characters in this one, so that probably helped my clear run, or my complete run. So overall, again, a pretty good, decent fight, much easier than the ones we had before. So hopefully you guys can actually beat this one as well. Good luck to you all, and I will be ending the video right here. Please remember to click like and subscribe if you haven't already. Each subscription is going to help my channel grow. Leaving a like on this video will also help with YouTube algorithm sending this video, recommending this video to other people who probably don't know how to beat these bosses, and maybe this video can help them out. Also, make sure to follow me on Twitter and on Facebook. Those are my social media. You can private message me there if you have any questions. I will answer you to the best of my abilities. And of course, leave down in the comments below what team you use in order to beat this fight. Let me know if you have a unique team. Let me know down in the comments below. This is Munchkins logging off, and I'll see you guys in the next level.